So let's start the today's lecture. So till now we have covered in water chemistry the hardness, now then alkalinity, then all the troubles, then how to solve that particular water if that water is hard. So hardness of the water is caused by the presence of large amount of the salts of calcium and the magnesium. It was all studied by you, and there are two types of the hardness. One is temporary, another is permanent hardness. Temporary hardness can be removed by boiling, as bicarbonates of the calcium and magnesium, which are responsible for temporary hardness, will be precipitated out during the boiling process. But for the removal of the permanent hardness, some special techniques are needed, because the chloride and the sulfates of calcium and magnesium, which are responsible for permanent hardness, will not undergo precipitation during the boiling only. So we have to opt certain special techniques. So in that process, or for that softening process, one of the special technique, that lime and soda, we have covered in last lecture. And in today's lecture, we will try to explain the zeolite process and ion exchange process. Okay. So according to the specification of the application, we have to keep the hardness in permissible level, which is provided by different organizations like WHO, ISI, and all. All the organizations have decided their limited permissible level of the hardness in the water sample, and depending on the specific application, or depending on the application of the type of the boiler for steam generation, actually you have to keep that hardness level in that permissible level. Okay, so if the requirement is up to 15 ppm, that boiler have that permissible level till 15 ppm, you can opt for that lime and soda. But if your requirement is less than that, that hardness should not be higher than the 10 ppm, then you have to select that zeolite process and ion exchange process. Okay, so let's discuss that. As the name is suggesting, zeolite process means you are going to use zeolite for the softening process during this particular method. So chemically, zeolite is hydrated sodium, aluminium, and silicate. Structure of the zeolite is there on your screen. Okay, this Na2, Al2O3 alumina, SiO2 silica, X, and Y mole of H2O. So X is maybe 2 to 10 here, and Y maybe 2 to 6 in numbers. Okay, so after that, whenever the chemical reaction will be there in that explanation, I will write Na2Ze to the structure of the zeolite, so that we can easily understand that particular process. Zeolite is capable of exchanging its sodium ion, which is present here. That is the sodium ion. Okay, so that zeolite is capable of exchanging its sodium ion with hardness causing calcium and the magnesium ions, which is actually present in the hard water. So this process is known as zeolite or permuttite process. So with with the diagram, you can understand that process. That this is the structure of a zeolite. In that, organic moieties are having that sodium ion, or you can say the sodium ions are entrapped in these large organic molecules or organic inorganic molecules. Okay, so if you percolate the hard water through that zeolite filter or the bed, what will happen? That sodium ions will actually get exchanged by the calcium and the magnesium ions, which are present in the form of the salts in hard water. Okay, so as a result, all the calcium, magnesium, or the heavy metal ions now reside on that zeolite bed or that filter, which is there in that particular tank or that equipment, and all the sodium ions and all the small molecule or the lightweight elements will flow in that water as a result, and you will be able to get the soft water. Okay, so zeolite are of the two type: natural zeolite and synthetic. One can have that synthetic processes inside the laboratory. One can synthesize these zeolites as well. So naturally found zeolite is natrolite, this Na2O, Al2O3, and 4SiO2 and 2H2O. It is less porous, it is amorphous, and yes, it is durable. And synthetic zeolites, which are synthesized in vitro inside the laboratory, are much porous and easy to use on gel-like structures, as they are having their gel-like structures. So they are prepared by heating sodium carbonate, alumina, and the silica inside the laboratory in certain conditions. So process, you're already aware now that hard water is percolating at a specific rate through a bed of the zeolite stacked in a cylindrical unit. The hardness causing elements are retained by the zeolite as calcium Zd and magnesium Zd, while the outgoing water contains all the sodium salts. Okay, so this is the whole process of zeolite. Now let's explain this process through some chemical reaction or what type of the chemistry that particular process is having. So as you know, the sodium 2Zd, this is the zeolite. If you have fitted the zeolite bed inside some container and start percolating that hard water, now hard water is containing all these salts, calcium bicarbonate, magnesium bicarbonate, or maybe calcium chloride or calcium sulfate, or maybe calcium chloride and magnesium sulfate. All these bicarbonates are causing temporary hardness, but chlorides and the sulfates of these are causing permanent hardness. Okay. So what happened when that particular hard water is actually you are passing through that zeolite bed? All the calcium and the magnesium ions entrapped in that particular zeolite bed or having that exchange with the sodium ions, because all the calcium and the magnesium are more liable to get having that reaction with these organic substances which are present on that zeolite. Okay, and as a result, all the sodiums will be there in the water. Okay, so after some time, all the sodium in the zeolites are replaced by calcium and the magnesium, giving calcium Zd and magnesium Zd structure to that zeolite. Such a zeolite bed is unable to soft water further and is said to be exhausted. So this, after some time, after that particular flow, when you use that process for the softening, you will see that all the sodium ions are exchanged. Now there is no more sodium ion left. Okay, so after continuous treatment, all the pores of the zeolite will packed with calcium and the magnesium because of the exchange of the sodium ion. This stage will reach in which there will no any sodium ions available for the exchange. This is known as exhaust stage of zeolite. So at this stage, if hard water is passing through the zeolite, there will not be any removal process of the hardness. So we have to regenerate the zeolite. This is known as regeneration process. So the zeolite bed is actually exhausted now. You have to regenerate it by treating with some solution or some chemical, that is concentrated brine solution, 10% NaCl solution. Okay, so we have to regenerate the resin at that regeneration process. Here, supply of the hard water will be stopped first, and exhausted zeolite is reclaimed by heating it with 10% NaCl solution. So let's discuss the reaction. Now you know that the structure of the resin will be in the exhausted stage, calcium Zd and magnesium Zd. After having the reaction with 10% NaCl solution, you can able to reclaim your that zeolite structure back as Na2Zd, and all the byproducts of the calcium and the magnesium in the form of the chlorides will form as a side product. Okay, on washing with cold water, the formed calcium chloride and magnesium chloride can be removed, and thus the zeolite can be regenerated, because calcium chloride and magnesium chloride having their tendency to be in the dissolved state. So you can easily remove them out of your process or that particular zeolite by simply washing with cold water. This is the whole zeolite process. Now this is the diagram showing that zeolite, how that particular zeolite process is having its working. So here is the tank which is fitted with the permutite or zeolite bed. In addition, one gravel sand filter is there to avoid any flow of form precipitates out of that outlet of the soft water. And this particular tank is fitted with inlet for the hard water as well as one injector. At the time of regeneration, that 10% NaCl solution you have to inject through that injector inside that tank. That process you have to first stop. Yes, am I audible, student?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Then this is during that process, first inlet of the hard water is there by using this. the water is actually able to percolate through that permutate or zeolite bed, and you will able to get the soft water after that exchange of the sodium ions by all the heavy metal ions which are present in the hard water. Okay, at the time of regeneration, you first stop that inlet and then start injecting 10% NaCl solution after reclaiming all the zeolite structure, and that process at that time that outlet must be closed, and all the calcium chloride and the magnesium chloride formed can be easily washed off out of this washing outlet. Okay, then again your structure of the zeolite is ready to use. You can again stop that washing and outlet and injector inlet. Then again your process, you can start your softening process. Okay, so this is all about the zeolite process. So by knowing the amount of the NaCl used for regeneration of the exhausted zeolite bed, the hardness of the water sample can be calculated. You may face this type of the numerical in your quizzes or in your examinations as well. So hardness can be calculated by after knowing the total volume of the water softened and the total volume of the NaCl solution used for the regeneration as well as its amount. So this is a very simple hardness formula. You aware about that. You studied it all in the type of the derivation in your hardness calculation part as well, that experiment. So there is no need to explain this again here. So after knowing the V1, V2, the total volume of the water and the total volume of the NaCl solution and amount of the NaCl in gram per liter, you can calculate the hardness of the water sample given in that particular numerical. Just put incorporate all the values here and you will be able to get that hardness in ppm. Okay, so let's take one sample problem depending on that formula. A zeolite softener was used to remove hardness of the 95,000 liters of the hard waters completely. The softener required 475 liters of the NaCl solution containing 18 gram per liter of NaCl for regeneration. Calculate the hardness of that hard water in ppm. So now you know that formula for the solution. First write the formula and the V1, V2 and M are all values are given. Just incorporate these values. Even their units are in the required or the appropriate values. So no need to change these. Just put the values or incorporate these values in that formula and do the mathematics. You will be able to get that hardness in ppm. Okay, if there is a requirement to change the ppm into degree Clark or degree French, just change according to that relation. I think you aware about that relation. What is the relation between degree Clark, degree French and ppm and all. So there are some advantages of this process and disadvantages. So advantages are it removes the hardness up to 10 ppm. The equipment is very compact. No bulky equipments are there. No impurities are precipitated. No formation of the sludge and scale. It requires very less time and skill as well. So these are all the advantages. Now disadvantages, as you know, the treated water contains more sodium. Not only the sodium ion which are already present in the hard water, but in addition, you are actually flowing all the sodium ions which are there in that zeolite bed. Now that sodium also is there in the treated water. So if in some kind of the pressure boilers there is a requirement to not have that sodium salts, so for that particular type of the boiler, this process is not recommended. It removes only positive ions and nothing is done with that negative ions or anions here. And one important thing is high turbidity water cannot be treated because that will clog the pores of that zeolite bed. So these all are the disadvantages. To meet these disadvantages, we are having one more process, ion exchange process. So if that particular application is required, so I already explained that key. If that according to the specification of the application, we have to keep the hardness in a permissible level, which is provided by different organizations, and depending on that particular application or requirement of the boiler, we can opt the different processes for the softening, maybe lime and soda, maybe zeolite or ion exchange. Okay, it depends on the specific application of the boiler or the industry. So two main units are there in the ion exchange process. As you know that ions are there, two types of the ions are there. One is a cation and second is an ion. So in that particular process, ion exchange process, we are going to treat our water. So in which both of the cations and the anions, positive as well as the negative ions, we are able to get freed from the water sample. Okay. So two main units are there, one containing cation exchange resin and the other containing anion exchange resin. So what are these resins? These are actually the giant organic molecules having acidic and basic groups and are known as ion exchange resin. So first one is the acid resin containing the acidic group with these large organic molecules, and the basic resin contains the basic group with these large organic molecules. Okay, so the acidic group is carboxylic acid and basic group is ammonium hydroxide group. Okay, so acid and the basic ion exchange resins are represented as RCOH and RNH3OH negative. Okay, so let's discuss that process. What type of that reactions will be involved there. So hard water is sent to the first compartment. So in this particular process, we are having two compartments rather than one tank. We are actually having two tanks. In first tank, tank containing a layer of the gravel and cation exchange resin, like it was in geolite bed, geolite process. So there we are having one gravel filters and one geolite resin. But here in the first compartment, we are having one gravel filter, and in addition to that, we are having cation exchange resin. Okay, when water percolates through the resin cation, all the positive ions, whatever that ion will maybe, like maybe heavy metal ion or lightweight elements like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, all will present in that water get exchanged with H plus, which is present on that resin. Now, you know the cation resin having its structure like RCOOH. So this H plus ion now is having their exchange with all the cations which are present in the water. It may be calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium and all. So as a result, you will get calcium acetate, magnesium acetate, sodium acetate, potassium acetate and like this. And all the H plus ions now will there be in the treated water. Okay, outgoing water will contains all the H plus ions. Then this water is made to pass in second anionic resin column, in which the basic resin is fitted with the gravel sand filter. It interacts with all the anions present in the hard water. Now you know the structure of that basic or that anion exchange resin is RNH3OH negative. That hydroxy group OH negative ion is capable to have that exchange with all the anions which are actually present now in that water, because now the water which is actually percolates through the that second compartment is having all the H plus ions and the remaining anions only. So all the anions now having an exchange with these OH negative ion. As a result, you will get RNH3Cl chloride sulfates of these ammonium salts, and OH negative ions will flow out of that particular treated water, or will be there in the water. So as a result, only H plus and OH negative ions will be there in the treated water. You can say you are able to filter all the cations as well as the anions out of your water. So you will get demineralized or deionized water after that. Okay, so this is the whole process in which two compartments are there. So this is the diagram showing that particular ion exchange process in which two compartments are there. One is cation exchange resin or another one is anion exchange resin. So in the cation compartment, cation resins are fitted, and in anion exchange resin, that particular anion resins are fitted. Okay, so in the ion exchange process, first the raw water is passing with the help of that inlet through the cation exchange resin, and the cation exchange resins remove all the cations present in the water by exchanging with H plus ions of the resin. That H plus ion is actually there in the form of RCOOH plus. Okay, because this is the structure of that resin. So H plus ions of the resin are having their exchange with the cations which are present in the hard water. After treatment, cations will reside over this resin and H plus ion will go to the water. Okay, so after that cation exchange, treatment water with H plus ions, and remaining anions will go to the next compartment, or you can say anion exchange resin. So the treated water now contains only H plus ions and the remaining anions only. Here all the anions of the hardness causing salts will remove by OH negative ions, which are actually present on this resin, RNS3 plus OH negative. Thus, all the anions of the hard water will reside over the anion exchange resin, and OH negative ion will go to the water. So after cation and anion exchange resin, now only H plus ion and OH negative ions are present in the water. Okay. So of course, now after passing hard water through the resin for a particular period, what will happen? Both the resin will clog with all the cations in cation resin and all the anions in anion resin. All the cations resin and the anion resins will actually blocked by these cation and anions which are residing on these particular resins. At this exhausted stage, further removal of the hardness is not possible, as there is no sufficient H plus ion here and OH negative ion here, okay, for any exchange. So now that particular process, after that particular exhausted stage, the removal of hardness is not possible for any exchanging of these ions. So then we have to again regain its structure or regenerate resin by using some suitable solutions. And this process is known as regeneration. Okay, so let's discuss that regeneration of the ion exchange resin. For the cation exchange resin, dilute HCl or dilute H2SO4 solution is injected to the resin. Then H plus will exchange all the cations here, either H2SO4 or dilute HCl. Now, all that calcium acetate formed after that process of softening, which are now the structure of that cation resin, it will have that exchange of the H plus ion with these calcium and the magnesium ions, which are entrapped now in the resin, and you will be able to reclaim that resin structure as RCOH again. So then H plus will exchange all the cations present in the resin, and the residual solution containing all the cations is passing to the sink. And where was that sink? Here is the sink. Okay, you can easily remove these formed calcium sulfates and the magnesium sulfate and all these soluble kind of the impurities out of that chamber through this sink. Okay. So same in the case of anions. For the regeneration process, we are using dilute NaOH, and that particular reaction will be RNS3Cl plus NaOH, and you will be able to reclaim your resin structure RNS3OH back, and all the NaCl or that particular type of that salts and sodium chloride, sodium sulfate, sodium bicarbonate, all particular type of that salts can easily be removed but through the sink, okay, as these are having its soluble tendency. So the regenerated resins are washed to remove calcium, sodium sulfates and the chlorides. The resins can be used again. The water treated by ion exchange process not only becomes soft but also free from all dissolved mineral impurity. It gets completely demineralized. So as a result, you get demineralized water after that particular whole process. So this is all that in ion exchange process. So is it clear to all? Are you having any doubt or confusion till now? No doubt. So okay, now I am giving one confusion to you. There is a chance of confusion of the point why hard water is not passing through anion exchange resin first, and why we are passing that water through cation exchange resin first. Why we are having that particular fitting where cation exchange resin compartment we are putting at first and then passing that particular water in an exchange resin. What happened if we pass that water first through the anion exchange resin? there is a chance of confusion of the point. Why that hard water is not passing through anion exchange resin first? No idea. This is because cations of the hardness causing salts like calcium chloride can combine with the OH negative present on that anion exchange resin. You know that calcium, if suppose if your water is having calcium chloride, okay, that is a kind of permanent kind of the hardness, calcium chloride. If OH negative are there, because anions resin are having that construction RNS3 OH negative, in that particular OH negative, in that process, calcium chloride may have that reaction with OH negative and will form calcium hydroxide. Is it so? And the calcium hydroxide is in the precipitate form. This precipitate will block the resin for further exchange of the anion, and you will not be able to get that particular process, because during that process you will get, if anion exchange resin, through anion exchange resin, all the cations will flow. What will happen? All the cation will form their hydroxides, and all the hydroxide with the cations are having their tendency to be in the precipitate form. Then these precipitates will block the resin, and you will not be able to get any further exchange of the anions. Even that whole process will get blocked. Okay, so that's why we are keeping that cation exchange resin first and passing that particular treated water where only H plus ions and anions present in the water, and then this water is actually percolates through the anion exchange resin only. Okay, so this is all about that anion exchange process. Advantages: highly acidic and the basic water can be softened. Very low hardness, nearly 2 ppm can be achieved. Can be used in high pressure boiler. Okay. Disadvantages: the equipment is very costly. All the resins which are used in this particular process are very costly. All the cation and anion resins. This is an expensive method because of these costly resins. And the simple thing is, turbid solution is there, so the whole process will get blocked. So before feeding that water, or before passing that water through these resins, you have to filter the old turbidity before treating with ion exchange resin. Okay, so these are all about that external treatments of the water during the softening process. So one more and last topic left in your syllabus from the water chemistry side is municipal water supply, and how that particular municipal parties or the bodies are having their treatment for these water supplies during the storage and during the transportation, how these different government bodies having their disinfection, give that particular process, how they disinfect their water during the storage in municipal parties. So the common requirement of the potable water are there on your screen. You can read these by your own. I will post that lecture on your slide, channel, all these slides. Okay, so no need to read these here. These are very simple. Have you ever come across this municipal party water, the municipal water? आप लोगों ने कभी municipal water देखा है?
No, ma'am.
Okay, there is no supply in your houses of the water.
No, ma'am. We live in villages, rural area, ma'am. Urban area, sorry.
Okay, so then you are using the potable water.
Yes, ma'am.
So the requirement must meet these. So the person who are living in urban areas must have that supply of the municipal water. So water treatment for domestic use employs the following steps. First one, screening, then sedimentation, filtration, and disinfectant. One, disinfection is the extremely important part. So let's discuss these one by one. What is screening? Screening is actually to screen the water through a large number of the holes. So all the floating materials are retained by them, and the leftover water is actually collected for the further process of the sedimentation. Okay, so sedimentation is the process of where the water is allowed to stand undisturbed in large tanks or deep tanks, when most of the suspended particles settle down at the bottom because of the gravity, the clear supernatant water is then drawn from the tank with the help of pumps. So this is actually the sedimentation process which the particular water treatment is used. These are very initial steps of the screening water and the sedimentation of the water. Then that drawn water out of that sedimentation process is allowed to filter through some kind of the filters. Depending on the different filters pores size, you actually get the treated water. And then last process is disinfection. This is actually the important part, and this is there in your syllabus as well. So disinfection may be achieved by boiling, by adding some chemicals. Okay. So first, by simple boiling, some bacteria and the germs are actually can be killed, or by adding bleaching powder. As you know, the bleaching powder is calcium oxychloride. So this is having its reaction with the water and forming calcium hydroxide and chlorine, liberated chlorine you can say. So calcium hydroxide can be easily filtered out because it is in the precipitate form, and that particular chlorine is able to disinfect the water and able to kill all the germs and the bacteria which are maybe present in that water. So this is actually the chlorination process. Okay, it is very important part, chlorination of the water for water treatment. So the chlorine can do by use of chlorine gas or by using sodium hypochlorite, calcium hypochlorite, and all this. In all the cases, hypochlorous acid is forming in presence of water, that hypochlorous acid, HOCl. This is actually the main disinfectant in chlorination process, which is able to kill all the germs and bacteria. So in all the processes, either by adding bleaching powder or by direct chlorine or by adding any chloramines, in all the process, you will see the generation of that HOCl will be there, that hypochlorous acid. And that hypochlorous acid is a weak acid, and also dissociation, it gives hypochlorite ion and H plus ions. So that OCl negative, that hypochlorite ion and hypochlorous acid, HOCl and OCl negative, are actually responsible for disinfectant, disinfection in the water. These are actually the main disinfectant during the chlorination process. So if we are adding direct chlorine, that direct chlorination is there, then you will see that reaction with the water, and hydrochloric acid and hypochlorous acid will form. And that hypochlorous acid is again able to kill the germs. And same case will be in the case of chloramines. If direct chloramines are applied for that disinfection process, then the same HOCl and is formed, and it is having its disinfectant properties. Okay. So in this, one important point is breakpoint chlorination. Before discussing that breakpoint chlorination, we have to discuss, or we must aware about three important terms. These three terms should understand clearly before going into detail of the breakpoint chlorination. First one is residual chlorine. Okay, residual chlorine, which is there on the y-axis. What is the residual chlorine? Second thing is the combined chlorine. What is the combined chlorine, which is actually written here on that graph, combined chlorine. And third one is the free chlorine. What is that free chlorine? Okay, so the free chlorine. Let's discuss first the free chlorine. What is the free chlorine? The total concentration of the chlorine in the form of chlorine or in the form of HOCl or OCl negative is refers to as free chlorine, because these particular chlorine formations are able to have the disinfectant properties. So these are primary disinfectant. And what are these? Either Cl2, HOCl or OCl negative. So these are known as free chlorine. So you can say the total concentration of the chlorine in the form of Cl2, chlorine, in the form of hypochlorous acid, HOCl, or hypochlorite ion, OCl negative, is referred as free chlorine. If that particular type of the forms are there in the water, means sufficient amount of the disinfectants are there, your water is not having any impurity, because all the chlorines or that particular impurities are already having the reaction with the chlorine. Now that much of that chlorine is there to treat your water. Now your water is actually treated or away from any type of the impurities. Okay, the combined chlorine. Second one is combined chlorine. What is a combined chlorine? When chlorine is in the combination with some organic or inorganic nitrogen compounds. And what are these nitrogen compounds? Like NH3, ammonia. From where that ammonia came in the picture of that water? Because all the decomposition process of the organic compounds like plants and the dead animals are having their decomposition process there, and during that decomposition ammonia may release. So from there that all the organic and the inorganic nitrogen compounds may be there, and all these organic inorganic nitrogen compounds have their reactions with the chlorine. If we are adding chlorine to the water, if organic and inorganic substances are present there, they will actually having the reaction with the chlorine. That is the disinfectant action. Okay, this is the process. That's why we are adding chlorine for disinfectant, as disinfectant. Okay, during this particular process. So if organic moieties or the inorganic moieties which are present in the water are in the combination with chlorine, then they are known as combined chlorine, like chloroamines, dichloroamines, trichloroamines, and all this. Okay, these are less effective than free chlorine. Even chloramines are acting as disinfectant. Okay, they are having that disinfectant properties, like I already explained in the last slide, that chloramine, this one. So this is actually the combined chlorine. That Cl2, HOCl, all are the free chlorine, and chloroamines are actually after the reaction with organic and the inorganic compounds, the chlorine forms chloramines. Maybe monochloroamine. If we are adding more chlorine, then dichloroamine. If we are adding more chlorine, then trichloroamine, like this. Okay. So all these combined forms of the chlorine with organic and the inorganic compounds are known as combined chlorine. Okay. The third one is residual chlorine. The residual chlorine is the sum of all free chlorine and combined chlorine. All these are known as residual chlorine. Okay. So let's get started that breakpoint chlorination. Why we are studying it? Because that breakpoint chlorination gives us the information that how much amount of the chlorine should be added to the water system to avoid any contamination, to avoid any type of the impurity like organic, inorganic, or to disinfect that water. Okay, that breakpoint is a point which gives you information that how much amount of the chlorine there should be maintained in the water system for disinfection properties. So you can say your water is away from any impurities. So that point is breakpoint chlorination. So when chlorine is added to water and the sample of the water is analyzed for available chlorine, it is found that the available chlorine is less than added. If you are adding the chlorine in the system and you analyze that water that for the available chlorine, that how much amount of the chlorine now available, so it is found that available chlorine, that is available chlorine is less than the added. This one is the added chlorine, the amount of the chlorine you are adding on the x-axis, and the available chlorine or free chlorine residuals are on the y-axis, and you analyze that particular water sample, then you see that you will not get a straight line graph. Instead, you will get a curve like this. Okay, first then there is a slight increase, then decrease. Means you find available chlorine is less than added. And why you are getting that graph is like this? Because the chlorine which you are adding is not only destroying the germs, but oxidizes all the organic and the inorganic reducing substances which are present in the water. So because of these reactions, the available chlorine is found less than the added chlorine. Okay. During the disinfection process, the available chlorine amount is actually getting somewhat less than the added one. Then available chlorine again increases here. You see that in available chlorine first, like this. Okay, then it is actually constructing all the organic compounds, and it will reach a high point, and due to decomposition, till now the chloro compounds are actually formed. That's why that available chlorine are having their increase. But after that point, when all the chloro organic compounds now formed, so at that point the destruction of the chloroamine takes place. That's why there is a decrease. And then after, you will reach a point that is known as break point. After that point, the residual chlorine begins to appear. That is actually residual chlorine. Okay, so that this particular break point is give you that information that at that point all the impurities and all these type of the organic and the reducing substances are actually get oxidized by the chlorine. Okay, now after that point, if you are adding more chlorine, that particular chlorine will be available in the form of free chlorine, because now all the reducing substances, organic substances, and all type of that colors and that foreign materials which are actually causing contamination to the water are actually get oxidized by the chlorine. Okay, so let's explain, try to explain this particular process in different stages. So during that whole breakpoint chlorination process, we get 4 different stages. So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. We are actually dividing that graph into different stages. So depending on that reactivity of that substances or impurities present in the water. So in stage 1, you can see there is actually no combined chlorine residual is found. Okay, here is that's why you are not able to see any graph line. Okay, or you can say there is a minimum chlorine residue. Why it is so? As you know, chlorine is a strong oxidizing agent. Okay, chlorine is a strong oxidizing agent, and on x-axis you are taking chlorine added in milligram per liter, and on y-axis you are having chlorine residual in milligram per liter. Okay, so as chlorine is added in this process like this, and chlorine is a strong oxidizing agent, whenever chlorine will add to the water, it immediately reacts with all the reducing agents. And what are the reducing agents? All the metal and all these organic materials. And metals may be iron, manganese, and organic material may be nitrites and all that. Okay, so all these reducing agents are having their reaction with oxidizing agent first. So during that stage 1, all the reducing compounds which are present in the waters is having their destruction, or having their reaction rather, with the chlorine, and you will not see any chlorine residue, because during that process all the reducing substances are having their reaction with the chlorine which is actually added in this process. This is known as chlorine demand, and it is the amount of the chlorine which reacts with the substances in the water and leaving behind an inactive form of the chlorine. Thus, there is no residual chlorine in the first step or the first stage, because all the chlorine which you are adding is having their reaction with all the reducing agent first. And here the chlorine which is actually after that you will get an inactive form of the chlorine, and destruction of the whole chlorine residuals will take place. So after the stage 1, or you can say if you are keep adding that chlorine in the system, so further addition of the chlorine leads to the reaction with organic matters and inorganic matters which are containing nitrogen like ammonia and all. So at that particular stage, all the ammonia and these organic nitrogen containing compounds will form chloramines and chloroorganic compounds during that stage. That's why the combined residuals will appears, and that combined residuals having their increment. So you will see an increase in that graph. You will see that the graph will be like this. It going up till the stage where the chloride to nitrogen containing compounds ratio reached up to 5:1. This is a theoretical assumption that theoretically that increment will be up to till ammonia and nitrogen weight ratio reaches 5:1, and till here all the formed monochloroamines remains as such. So in this step, all the combined residual will form and formation of all the chloramines will take place. And if further addition of the chlorine is there, as you are keeping the chlorine from 0.3, 0.4, 0.4 milligram like this. So further addition of the chlorine exceed that ratio 5:1 of the ammonia and the nitrogen weight. And this results in a conversion of all the monochloroamines into di, because you are adding that chlorine. So monochloroamine to dichloroamine, dichloroamine to trichloroamine, and ultimately all the chloroamines having their destruction into byproducts, or you can say the small volatile compounds like nitrogen gas and nitrates and chlorides. Okay, so thus this stage is known as destruction of that chloramine. That is the stage 3, and you will see a decrease in that chlorine residual. Okay, so at the end of the stage 3, or you can say after destruction, it reaches a minimum, and this point is known as break point, that C. Okay, which I am actually designated by C. That is a break point achieved after the destruction of the chloramine. And that break point chlorination is a point at which all the impurities present in the water, like ammonia, organic compounds, and all the reducing agents will oxidized by chlorine, and further addition of the chlorine after this point will remain as a free chlorine. That's why you will see a sharp increase. After that break point, if you are adding the chlorine in the system, so further addition of the chlorine in the system will remain as a free chlorine, because now after that point the chlorine demand is 0. Now there is no reducing agent, there is no organic compounds, there is no ammonia and all that. All are having their reactions in stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3 as well. Okay, all the type of the impurities are already oxidized. Now if you are adding the chlorine after that break point chlorination, you will you will get that chlorine in the form of free chlorine, like Cl2 in combined chlorine like chloramines and all, or in HOCl or OCl negative form. That free chlorine may be in the form of Cl2, HOCl or OCl negative, hypochlorous acid or hypochlorite ion. Okay, that's why the free residual will be there after that point, or combined residuals like chloramine and all. So this is actually a very important point, break point. What is the break point? From break point onward, the amount of the chlorine added remains in water either as Cl2 or HOCl or OCl negative. This particular point is actually helpful in transportation and the storage of the municipal water, because this available free chlorine will act as a disinfectant and protects from contamination. So from breakpoint, you are having very important idea. You can get an important idea that how much chlorine as disinfectant should be added to the water. Okay, so every government body have decided the amount of the chlorine residual that must be present at all point during the storage as well as the transportation of that water. So that system will be nearly, if I'm talking about Indian government, then Indian government body has decided that limited amount, or that amount of the chlorine residual must be maintained at 0.2 milligram per liter. So that much amount of 0.2 milligram per liter of the amount of the chlorine must be maintained throughout that system, or throughout the transportation as well as storage of the municipal water. Okay, I am having one more graph of that breakpoint chlorination. In that, in the first stage, all that iron, manganese, nitrites are having their reaction with the chlorine. That's why you are not having any chlorine residual here, because all the chlorine will be in the form of inactive chlorine. That's why the chlorine residual is not appear in this stage. after that point, if further addition of the chlorine will be there, then that chlorine will have that reaction with all the organic compounds or nitrogen containing that material like ammonia and all, and will form monochloroamines till the point or that ratio where chlorine and the ammonia containing nitrogen compounds are having its ratio 5:1. But further addition of the chlorine is having their destruction into monochlorine to dichloro, then trichloro, and ultimately will reach a point that is the break point where all the formed combined residuals or these organic chloroorganic compounds are having their destruction into small volatile compounds. And if further addition of these chlorine, this chlorine is there in the system, you will get that chlorine will remain as free chlorine or residual chlorine. Okay, so you will see the graph like this, because after that point, if you are adding the chlorine, will remain as free chlorine in the water. And you know the free chlorine is that concentration of chlorine, HOCl and OCl negative. But that free chlorine residual is also having that combined chlorine also at the stage 4. And that combined chlorine is chloroamines and all. Or you can say the chlorine in combination with organic compounds is actually the combined chlorine. So stage 4 is having both type of the chlorines, either in the free available chlorine form or combined chlorine form after the breakpoint chlorination. So that is actually important one, the breakpoint chlorination. What is breakpoint? The breakpoint is a point which gives an important idea about that amount of the chlorine, that how much chlorine as a disinfectant should add to the water to avoid any type of that contamination in the water, to avoid any type of the impurities. Okay. Is that clear to all? What is breakpoint chlorination? Yes or no?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
chlorination process, but that breakpoint chlorination that gives you the information that how much chlorine as a disinfectant should be added to the water, and different bodies are having maintained their so where we were discussing that breakpoint chlorination. So one last point is dechlorination left in that one. So advantages of the breakpoint. Now you know that it removes all the compounds that impart color, bad odor, and the unpleasant taste to the water. Is destroy all the organic matters, dissolved ammonia, and microorganisms in the water. Okay, one simple question is there. If we are adding chlorine to a water which does not contain any reducing agent, then what type of the graph you will get? If you are adding the chlorine to a water system where no reducing agents are there, what type of the graph you will get? Yes, anybody? Quickly. If you are adding the chlorine to a system or that water which are not containing any type of the reducing compounds, then what will happen? What type of that graph you will get? Quickly. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
If reducing compounds are not there, means that particular step will not be there. Because in the stage 1, all the reducing compounds are having their reaction with the oxidizing agent Cl2, because chlorine is a strong oxidizing agent. So during stage 1, the first reaction will be the fastest one. That is, all the oxidizing agents are having their reaction with reducing agents. So that oxidation is actually takes place in very first stage. So if that system is not having any type of the reducing agents, and what are the reducing agents? Like metals and organic compounds like nitrites and all. Means if these iron, manganese, nitrite type of the reducing agents will not be there, means you will not see that stage 1. Got it? So directly you will having that reaction with all the ammonia or the nitrogen compounds. If reducing agents are not there, means organic compounds and the inorganic compounds with the nitrogen will be there in the picture, and directly you will get the stage 2. Is it clear? One more question. If we are adding chlorine to a water which is clean, if you are adding the chlorine to a clean water, then what type of the graph you will get? If the water is clean and you are adding chlorine for the chlorination process, what type of the graph will be there? Then the chlorine residual will be
0.
equal to chlorine added, na? Because there is no impurity, the water is clean, there is no reducing agent, there is no organic compound, there is no inorganic nitrogen compounds, there is no, water is clean, and you are adding the chlorine, means all the chlorine will be formed in the free available residual chlorine. The chlorine residual will be either in the form of chlorine or HOCl or OCl negative. Means the chlorine residual will be the same as the chlorine added, equal to the amount of the chlorine added. Is it so? Then the graph will be this straight line. Means you are not getting what I am actually trying to convey. Is it clear to all? Yes. Time is over.
Yeah, I'm not net enough.
Yes.
I'm not. I'm something net enough.
What was there?
Next class again.
Yes. The class is over. I'm just downloading the attendance. And it was the last lecture from the water chemistry side. In the next class, you will meet with a different set of instructor with different chapter. The water chemistry chapter is over. Okay. So I have downloaded attendance. I will post that in your channel. Okay, now you can leave the lecture. I've downloaded